The East African savanna, 800 years ago. A bone-crushing roar splits the darkness as 400 pounds of muscle and claw test the acacia barriers. Hyena calls echo from 3 directions, pack hunters circling for weakness. Inside the thorned compound, a mother pulls her infant closer as livestock huddle in terror. One broken branch, one gap in the defences, and dawn will bring only scattered bones and bloodstains. Yet the family sleeps peacefully. This is no accident. This is the result of 4,000 years of architectural evolution, where a single design flaw meant death for everyone inside. So how did ancient Africans create sleeping sanctuaries in the world's most lethal landscape? Drop a modern person into ancient Africa and they'd become prey within hours. Yet for millennia, entire communities not only survived, but thrived in environments where apex predators outnumbered humans. They had no steel, no concrete, no electric fencing. The answer lies in humanity's most ingenious predator-proof architecture, solutions so effective that modern wildlife experts still study and adapt them today. Unlike anywhere else on Earth, Africa forced humans to coexist with the planet's deadliest collection of apex predators. While other civilizations eliminated or relocated dangerous wildlife, Africa's ecosystem was too vast, too complex, too populated with lethal hunters. Lions delivering 500-kilogram impact forces, leopards scaling 15-metre trees in seconds, hyenas with bone-crushing jaws and pack intelligence, crocodiles lurking in every water source. This wasn't about building simple walls. It was about understanding the psychology, hunting patterns, and physical capabilities of dozens of different predators, then creating architectural countermeasures for each specific threat simultaneously. The archaeological record reveals that ancient Africans didn't just solve this problem, they mastered it with innovations that rival modern defensive systems. But mastery began with understanding the enemy. And nowhere is this more evident than in the stone fortresses that still stand today. At Thimlich Ohinga in Kenya, dry stone walls rise 4.2 metres without a single drop of mortar. Every stone was cut and positioned to create barriers that have stood for 600 years. But these builders knew that height alone wouldn't stop a determined predator. The real innovation lay in psychological warfare against lions. Lions, despite their incredible strength, are energy conservers. They can leap impressive distances, but won't waste effort on uncertain terrain. The builders exploited this weakness ruthlessly. Wall tops were deliberately designed with unstable surfaces, loose stones that would shift under weight, creating just enough uncertainty to deter even the most desperate predator. But the genius went deeper. Stone analysis reveals builders selected rocks based on their acoustic properties. When disturbed, these stones created distinctive warning sounds, an early alert system that could wake sleeping families the instant a predator tested their defences. Yet even these stone marvels couldn't match the sophistication of the living fortresses developed in East Africa's savannas, where communities turned nature's own weapons against the hunters. The architectural ingenuity extended to materials science itself. At Tata Somba sites, walls weren't simple mud. They were precise composites of mud, straw, and cattle dung, creating barriers 60 to 80 centimetres thick. The cattle dung wasn't just binding agent. It contained compounds that repelled insects and small predators while waterproofing the structure through the wettest seasons. Surface treatments revealed even deeper knowledge. Nere fruit was processed into varnish that made walls too slippery for leopards to climb. Chemical analysis shows nere contains compounds that remain slippery even when wet, maintaining anti-climbing properties through all weather conditions. But materials science alone couldn't protect communities where the terrain itself became the enemy. In the Maasai heartlands, families perfected what may be history's most effective predator-proof sleeping system. These weren't simple corrals. They were precision-built defensive ecosystems, achieving a documented 99.9% success rate against lion attacks over 10 years of modern testing. The secret lay in weaponizing the landscape itself. Acacia mellifera wasn't chosen randomly from hundreds of available species. This particular acacia produces thorns in precise patterns, dense enough to create impenetrable barriers, but arranged in a way that maximizes psychological deterrence. Modern research shows that lions approaching acacia barriers will test them with their paws first. Mellifera's specific thorn pattern creates a painful but non-injuring sensation that causes lions to abandon their approach entirely. Branches were cut from living trees during specific seasonal periods when sap content created maximum flexibility, then woven together using techniques that provided structural redundancy. If one section was damaged, the surrounding framework would immediately compensate, maintaining barrier integrity even under direct assault. The breakthrough was in the layered defense concept. The outer ring of thorns was just the beginning. Inside, elevated sleeping platforms placed families beyond the reach of any ground-based predator. Platform heights were precisely calculated, high enough to be safe from lions and hyenas, but low enough that leopards couldn't use them as launching points for attacks on higher structures. But what happened when the terrain itself became the enemy? In Ethiopia's brutal highlands, communities faced challenges that forced them to reimagine the very concept of shelter. At 4,000 meters elevation, where oxygen is thin and temperatures plummet, Ethiopian communities couldn't rely on conventional construction materials. Instead, they transformed natural rock shelters into advanced defensive systems that protected families for over 47,000 years. At Fincha Habera, archaeologists discovered sleeping arrangements that read like military tactical manuals. These weren't crude cave dwellings. They were carefully engineered defensive positions that incorporated deep understanding of both predator behavior and mountain ecology. The entrance modifications were particularly brilliant. Boulder piles were strategically positioned to create maze-like approaches that forced any predator to expose itself to defenders while preventing pack animals like hyenas from coordinating their attacks. The design exploited the hunting patterns of highland predators. Leopards and hyenas that relied on surprise attacks were forced into disadvantageous positions where their natural advantages became fatal liabilities. Even water access was integrated into the defensive design. Year-round springs were channeled through stone-lined passages that prevented contamination while maintaining security. Sleeping areas were positioned to provide multiple escape routes, but only through passages too narrow for large predators to follow. Yet even these mountain fortresses couldn't match the audacity of communities that decided to abandon the ground entirely, taking their families hundreds of meters into the sky where no earthbound predator could follow. The Dogon people of Mali created perhaps the most extreme predator-proof sleeping arrangements in human history. Their cliff dwellings, carved directly into the 250-kilometer Bandiagara escarpment, placed entire families hundreds of meters above ground level, completely beyond the reach of any terrestrial predator. But accessing these aerial sanctuaries required solving engineering puzzles that would challenge modern rock climbers. Hand and footholds were carved into cliff faces with precision that allowed safe passage for humans carrying children and supplies, while remaining impossible for even the most agile predators to navigate. The granaries built into cliff crevices reveal extraordinary planning capabilities. These structures could only be accessed through climbing routes that required specific human techniques, routes that exploited the fundamental differences between human and animal locomotion. Food storage was literally suspended in mid-air, protected not just from predators, but from floods, fires, and human raiders. Inside the cliff dwellings, sleeping arrangements included multiple backup safety measures. Even if a predator somehow managed to reach the main living area, multiple escape routes led to even higher chambers that could only be accessed by humans familiar with secret passages and climbing techniques passed down through generations. While mountain communities reached for the sky, forest dwellers faced the opposite challenge: how to sleep safely when deadly predators could approach through dense vegetation without being detected until the moment of attack. In Central Africa's dense forests, where visibility was limited and predators could approach undetected, communities developed an entirely different strategy, building upward into the forest canopy itself, creating elevated sleeping platforms that used the trees as a natural defensive framework. These weren't simple tree houses. Archaeological evidence reveals advanced construction techniques that incorporated living trees into sophisticated structural systems. Branches were trained and shaped over years to create natural platforms strong enough to support entire families. The construction process required detailed understanding of tree biology, which species would support specific loads, how to encourage growth in desired directions, and how to integrate multiple trees into unified defensive structures. The genius was in the access systems. Climbing routes to sleeping platforms used removable elements that could be pulled up at night, creating gaps that were impossible for predators to cross. Even the most accomplished climbing predators found themselves stranded on lower branches, while families slept safely in the canopy above. Emergency escape routes connected platforms between multiple trees, allowing families to move through the forest canopy without ever descending to ground level, where patient predators waited in ambush. But individual family solutions, no matter how ingenious, couldn't match the scale of protection needed for entire cities. In West Africa, one civilization decided to wall off the predator threat entirely, creating defensive works that dwarfed anything built before or since. When European explorers first encountered the walls of Benin in the 15th century, they were stunned by the sheer scale of construction. This wasn't just a city fortification, it was a 16,000-kilometre network of earthworks and stone barriers that surpassed China's Great Wall in total length. But the primary purpose wasn't to keep out human enemies. It was to create predator-free sleeping zones for one of Africa's largest urban populations. The construction specifications were staggering. Earthworks reached 20 metres in height, requiring 100 times more material than the Great Pyramid of Giza. But the real innovation was in the integrated design that created multiple defensive layers. Even if predators somehow breached the outer barriers, inner walls and elevated structures provided backup protection for sleeping families. The construction incorporated advanced drainage systems that prevented wall erosion during rainy seasons while creating water obstacles that deterred crocodiles and other aquatic predators. Sleeping compounds within the wall system were positioned to provide overlapping fields of observation, ensuring that approaching threats could be spotted and countered before they reached inhabited areas. Yet even Benin's massive walls couldn't match the architectural perfection achieved by the master builders of southern Africa, who created stone cities that represent the absolute pinnacle of predator-proof design. Great Zimbabwe represents the ultimate achievement of ancient African defensive architecture. The Great Enclosure's walls reach 11 metres high with foundations 5.5 metres thick, creating barriers that protected 10,000 to 20,000 people during the height of this remarkable civilization. The dry stone construction technique was revolutionary. Without using mortar, builders created walls that were actually stronger than conventional masonry. Each layer was slightly recessed from the last, creating a stabilizing inward slope that distributed weight and provided structural redundancy. These walls could withstand ground tremors, extreme weather, and even direct attacks from the largest predators without losing their integrity. Inside the great enclosures, sleeping arrangements followed military precision. Elevated platforms provided safe sleeping areas, while strategic positioning ensured that every family had access to multiple escape routes. The circular design eliminated blind corners where predators could hide while creating clear sight lines for defenders monitoring the perimeter. But what made all these architectural marvels possible wasn't just human ingenuity. It was the development of material science so advanced that it rivals modern engineering capabilities. What unified all these solutions was intimate knowledge of predator behavior. Every defensive feature exploited specific weaknesses: lions' energy conservation, leopards' risk assessment, hyenas' need for coordination. Modern wildlife biologists studying these structures have confirmed that ancient builders understood predator psychology at levels matching current scientific research. This ancient knowledge wasn't just theoretical. Modern research proves these techniques remain as effective today as they were thousands of years ago. In 2018, Tanzania's Living Walls project achieved 99.9% success rates against lion attacks using traditional acacia barrier principles. At Thimlik Ohinga, those 600-year-old stone walls with their acoustically selected rocks still stand. The loose stones on top still shift under weight, still deter lions through psychological warfare rather than brute force. The same principles now influence security design from military installations to wildlife reserves. The next time you lock your doors at night, remember the families who slept peacefully while lions prowled beyond barriers engineered with nothing but stone tools, natural materials, and intimate knowledge of their predators' minds. They conquered the world's deadliest landscape, not through superior strength, but through understanding that turned nature's own weapons into shields.